If you've finished the first part of the Henry VI trilogy by William Shakespeare, then today's work just might be for you. Today, I will be taking a look at Henry VI Part 2 by the bard himself, William Shakespeare. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we're taking a look at another one of the history plays, and possibly the most obscure history play, or the least liked history play? I don't know. It is not one of William Shakespeare's best works, at least compared to all of his other works. I always feel a bit foolish trying to make any kind of judgments about William Shakespeare's work, considering the least of his works is going to be better than anything I could create. That being said, I do think a summary is necessary to understand what in the world is going on in this play, because I'm confident the average person does not know. So in the first act of this play, we start out with Henry VI just having married Margaret of Anjou. And it's worth remembering that in Henry VI Part 1, he was so very young that this is a symbol of his progress, his growth, and his development. At least that is what appears to be the intention of it. This marriage had been arranged by the Duke of Suffolk, one of his counselors, a supporter of him. However, the other English nobles are incredibly discontented because as part of the marriage settlement, the territories of Anjou and Maine had been ceded to France. So he got a marriage out of it, but he had to give up large holdings of land. And that, of course, weakens England's position in the 100 Years' War, and it sows the seeds of discontent among the nobles. And so tensions really start to rise as the Duke of Gloucester, the Lord Protector of England, confronts the loss of these territories. And at the same time, the Duke of York, who secretly harbors ambitions for the throne, so Margaret, the new queen, she actually disapproves of Gloucester's influence over her husband. And so she actually allies with Suffolk, the Duke of Buckingham, and Cardinal Beaufort, and she tries to undermine Gloucester's influence. At the same time, Richard Plantagenet, the Duke of York, enlists the support of the Earls of Salisbury and Warwick in his plan to challenge Henry's right to the throne, laying the groundwork for what will become the War of the Roses. Act 2 begins with the trial of the Duchess of Gloucester, Eleanor Cobham, who had been accused of practicing witchcraft in order to try and harm the king and, of course, to elevate her own husband, the Duke of Gloucester. Of course, her conviction leads to her public humiliation and then banishment, and this scandal, it really weakens Gloucester's position, and his enemies use it as an opportunity to really drive a wedge between him and the king. And meanwhile, York continues to gather support for his claim to the throne, manipulating popular discontent against the king. And so you get a lot of these long scenes where he is trying to tell large groups of people all the ways in which the king has done them wrong. And so this scene shifts to Jack Cade, a commoner who is influenced by York to lead a rebellion against Henry's government. And so then Cade's uprising is presented as a populist movement with really violent and chaotic undertones. In Act 3, Gloucester's enemies, which are being led by Queen Margaret and Suffolk, conspire to have him arrested on charges of treason. Despite his innocence, Gloucester is imprisoned, and shortly afterwards he's murdered by Suffolk's agents. And the murder, it shocks the nobles, and it leads to a really intense confrontation between the Duke of York and, of course, Queen Margaret's faction. And so Suffolk is banished for his role in the murder, but as he leaves England, he is captured and executed by pirates. Simultaneously, York's ambitions become even more evident as he raises an army under the pretext of quelling the rebellion led by Jack Cade. And Cade's rebellion gains momentum, leading to widespread violence and chaos throughout London. In Act 4, Jack Cade's rebellion reaches its peak with his forces taking control of London, and then Cade declares himself Lord of London and imposes brutal rule, but his tyranny alienates his supporters. And so eventually Cade's rebellion, it's going to collapse, and he is killed, symbolizing the failure of this commoners' revolt. But it had really set the seed for an upheaval that gives room for York and the other leaders to try and make something of all the political fragility. So with the rebellion crushed, York is going to return to England with his army, and he now openly challenges Henry's right to the throne. And York reveals his claim to the crown. He gives this long speech where he describes cousins and how many. It's absurd to an American like me who finds the concept of a monarchy absurd. But he uses this claim based on his descent from Lionel, Duke of Clarence, who had been an older brother of Henry's ancestors, and he uses that for a pretext for declaring the throne to be his own. And of course, the act ends with both sides preparing for conflict, which is going to be the beginning of the War of Roses. And this is where we pick up in the final act of the play. But as you know, this is only the second of 3 plays, so this final act is not going to have all that much resolution. In the final act, we're going to see all the escalating tensions between the Lancastrians, those that were loyal to King Henry, and the Yorkists, those led by the Duke of York. And we have the Battle of St. Albans, and it's going to be the first armed conflict of the War of the Roses. And York's forces, including his sons Edward and Richard, are victorious. They actually killed the Duke of Somerset, who had been one of the most important supporters of Henry. The play ends with Henry fleeing the battlefield. So he survives. There's a part 3, so you know he's going to survive. But the conclusion, it really sets the stage for not just the next play in this trilogy towards Henry VI, but just the larger historical tetralogy of this power struggle between the two houses of Lancaster and York, which is going to be the War of the Roses. And it's actually going to take up more than just the next play. But that is where this play leaves off. This is an interesting play for a lot of reasons. The fact that it's only the second one in a 3-part series, and in some regards an even larger series as you look at the rest of the history plays. It's also odd because when it was written, doesn't exactly make a lot of sense. If you go and you look at the trajectory of all the history plays, they were not written chronologically. This one was actually probably one of the earlier ones written. That's also one of the reasons why I think it's not quite as good. It was probably written before Henry IV or Henry V. And the amount of history in this as compared to some of the other history plays is interesting. The other history plays do have big moments, but not quite in the same way. I mean, Henry V, the big part of that is the Battle of Agincourt. That really happened. That was a real thing. But a lot of the other is just story that Shakespeare is making up or maybe using some kind of sources. But it was a popular depiction. This one seems to actually be trying to tap into a little more authenticity. I think that's actually one of the things that's a sign that it was one of his earlier plays, because it just wasn't quite as creative in some regards. It's also just kind of a strange play in many respects. I've already said this about his other history plays. Tonally, they're not all the same. A matter of fact, some of them are much more humorous, some of them have zero humor and seem more like a tragedy, and some are somewhere in between. And I would say that this one is, if anything, closer to the tragedy side. You have a lot more death in this, and you don't really even have any main characters that you feel particularly sympathetic towards. Henry VI doesn't come off all that appealing in this, and all of the machinations going on around him are totally unappealing to most people, and it highlights just how frustrating court life can be and the politics involved even when you have a monarchy. So I would say I would recommend this work to somebody who is really looking to just finish all of Shakespeare's plays. I would put this pretty low on the list of something I'd recommend for a variety of reasons, not just the quality of it, just where it fits in and everything. I can't say that I would be in a hurry to recommend this to really anybody else. I do think that there's definitely things worth enjoying in it. It's Shakespeare, so the language is appealing. I do think the speeches that York gives as he tries to create this populist movement are some of the best parts of it, and I do think those are worth reading because I actually think they highlight some of the elements, some of the absurdities of the concept of a monarchy, but that's just me. But I can't say that those are enough of a reason to draw most people in. Who wouldn't I recommend this for? Most people. I mean, people that are looking for more Shakespeare in their lives, this would not be my go-to play for them. I would pick a lot of other plays before this. I do think that there is stuff to appreciate, but I don't think your average person is really going to enjoy how much they have to look up, how much work they have to do to even understand this, the fact that they would have to go back and read part 1 to really appreciate this, and then even read part 3 to see a conclusion, at least to the Henry VI aspect of what is really a 4-play series. For all those reasons, I don't think most people would like this, but that's just me. Please let me know you have a difference of opinion. Please put it in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on this play or on the histories or any Shakespearean play. Just let me know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.